as Luann said, I'm with Opportunities Exchange, and I've been so OpEx kind of leads the shared services work across the country. Louise Stoney is the co-founder of OpEx and has been working on these issues for about 15 or 20 years. About 6 years ago, I joined the team. Before that, this might be of interest to you, before that, I was the executive director of the NACI affiliate in the Philadelphia area. And so have spent really my entire career working on how to address both the quality and the supply of early childhood education. And that's kind of what led me to shared services. Christina, do you want to give say a quick hello and a few words about yourself?
Sure. My name is Christina Goodwin. I'm the executive director of Pine Forest Children's Center in the south end of Burlington. I've been an early childhood educator for 18 years, so obviously it's in my heart and soul at this point. I come to this work first as a teacher, but then also as a parent to 2 young children. Totally shifted my perspective. Luann sort of brought me into shared services. Like, I was totally sold on the concept about 6 years ago. So that's something I'm really passionate about. I'm the president-elect of the NAYC board, or the Vermont AYC board. Whoa, I just promoted myself. So that's also a really big passion of mine, is advocating for early childhood educators in the state of Vermont. So that's a little bit about me.
Great, thanks, Christine. So Luann, let's go kind of quickly through the next few slides, because I don't want to talk about OpEx. I want to talk about you and your work. So,
sorry. Oh, sorry.
Okay. So we just did introductions. So this is kind of our theory of change at OpEx. We really believe that you have to pay attention to both the pedagogical work of early childhood programs, and you have to have business leadership. To do one without the other, it really creates an imbalance, right? We can have profitable programs that are not good quality. We all know that those exist, but we've also seen really high quality programs who can't hold on to teachers because they can't really pay competitive wages, or even worse, they strive for quality, but they can't pay the bills at the end of the day, and they have to close their doors. So what we're about is really putting these two pieces together. And we think that even though the work that I do is mostly around creating shared service alliances, we're very focused on business automation, on using technology, because we think that we know that even if you're not part of an alliance, as an independent program, just using childcare management software can make an extraordinary difference in how stable and financially strong your program is. And we're going to talk about that as we go through this. Next slide. So business software really changes your role as a director of a program. So you may be spending a lot of time chasing down paper signatures, reports, and things like that. When you make the shift to business software, to childcare management software in particular, you spend less time collecting data and more time understanding what the data means and using it to make decisions about how to best run your program. Next slide. And so specifically what we mean by that is that you can focus on these metrics that matter. And these are the things that make the biggest difference. You may have heard Louise Stoney talk about the iron triangle, but in order to be profitable as an early childhood program, you've got to keep every classroom full. You've got to collect all of the money that is owed to you, and you have to be collecting enough revenue per child that it's fully covering your costs. But the other thing that we've really learned in the last couple of years, and this is where software makes a huge difference, is lowering your administrative overhead, the cost of your administrative overhead. So the circle that you see here is actually a pie chart from a real program. And this was actually, we have a before and an after. This is actually the after slide, but I think we could even do better than this. So we took all their personnel money, all the money they were spending on staff, we put it in 3 buckets: administration, support staff, and teacher wages. And what we found is we were actually able to drive their spending on direct teacher staff up from 48%. When we first started working with them, they were spending less than half of their personnel dollars on teachers. By becoming more efficient, they were able to move that number up to 62%. I have a personal goal before I really retire that we could get that number up to 75%. And I think we really can if we maximize, if we spend more time automating processes and focusing on putting all of those supports into teacher wages. Next slide. But the other thing, and Christina's going to chime in here in a couple minutes and talk about real life. The other thing that is also apparent, and Christine really reminded me of this as we were preparing for today, is that it also changes your role, first of all, to someone who can use business intelligence, but also to someone who has more free time to be able to support teachers. I know that all of you know about this circle, you know, we call it different things, but basically what it means to be a reflective teacher is you do something, you think about what you did, you reflect on it, you modify it, you go back and try again, right? In order to be able to do that reflection, you've got to have time, and you need to have support from your administrator, your director. And so directors can really, when they're using automation, directors have the opportunity to use the time that's freed up to really support teachers to become the pedagogical leaders that probably most of you went into this work to be in the first place. Next slide. So this is another way of saying the same thing. Most directors really want to focus on educational leadership, but they've got to contend with a myriad of reporting requirements and all of these other things. Next slide. Automation can help you streamline operations so that you have more time for education and programs. So let's keep going. I want to really get into the meat of all of this. So automation is what makes all of this possible. Next slide. Business leadership. So let's really talk turkey about how a CCMS puts data in your hands to help you make decisions. Next slide. So there's a lot of things that are out of our control, right? We've been reminded of that this year. And so tons of things we can't control: the economy, the pandemic. We can't really control issues around family wages or affordability. We can't control the up and down nature of demand right now. So there are many things out of our control. However, we're not helpless. There are lots of things that we can control. So you can control your program's financial health by thinking about things like those iron triangle metrics, pricing, thinking about expenditures, and also you can control how you communicate and how you collect and use data. So child care management software helps you be proactive rather than reactive. Next slide. Being able to measure things is the first step. And I'm going to let you read through some of these slides. Let's keep going, Luann. You'll get a copy of this when it's done, and you can take your time. But so the iron triangle of finance. So these are the questions that you need to be able to answer as a program administrator. How much money is owed to you? And who owes you that money, and how long have they owed you that money? How fully enrolled are your classrooms? Is your price roughly the same as your cost? Do you have your arms around the cost and by classroom, because you know that it's very different for 3- and 4-year-olds than it is for younger children? And what % of your personnel costs are going to administrative overhead? CCMS can help you answer these questions. Next slide. So full enrollment, how does CCMS help? It streamlines the process for enrolling families, helps you manage communication for families on your wait list, helps you with full fee collection, because moving to electronic fee collection has a dramatic impact on how quickly and how fully you're able to collect your fees. And then revenue covering the per child cost, it can help you really understand those costs and how those costs can really shift based on enrollment. And so understanding the cost and any gap that you have is critical to being able to close in that gap. Next slide. So here's an example of a vacancy report. What I want you to notice about this report is this report does more than tell you I have an opening here and an opening there. But this report actually tells you by classroom, what is your enrollment rate? And then how does that translate into actual dollars that I'm losing? And you can see, you know, if you just look at that 88% enrollment rate, that sounds pretty good, right? 88% enrollment, yeah, I can live with that. But when you start to understand that at that rate, you're actually losing $112,000 in revenue, that's when it really starts to hit home. So Christina, why don't you jump in here and talk a little bit about how CCMS has impacted your understanding of this?
Yeah, so I will say that I was a non-CCMS believer pre-pandemic. It was not something that we were really, as a program, open to having in terms of, you know, the thoughts of having more technology in the classroom was sort of a driving force up to why we were choosing to not necessarily jump on board. But obviously with COVID, we all know that parents weren't allowed into the building anymore. So this really became, the driver was for us communication. And so hopefully throughout this, I can explain well beyond why we chose it for communication, because using a CCMS system has really helped our program to sort of overall streamline and become more efficient in terms of how we are approaching the business side of my organization. So for tracking enrollment, as you probably all know, that it's really key to any program success. And so our childcare management software has allowed us to know where we have vacancies in the moment. We are a program that has a waiting pool of about 220 families from infants through preschoolers, which means that's a pretty big binder with all of those waiting pool applications. So when someone would call on the phone and say, how much longer until you possibly have an infant slot? It meant flipping through lots of pieces of paper to give an answer, which doesn't always make a great impression either, as well as being really inefficient. So we are able to keep our waiting pool within here. So we also know if a vacancy suddenly comes up, you know, we all know there's families who don't necessarily give you 30 days notice. We can easily go through and find a family in our waiting pool who might match the programmatic needs we have to hopefully reduce that loss in revenue. It also has been streamlining in terms of tracking enrollment, that we have digital access to all of this information. So I could look at the Bumblebee classroom right now and know everyone's parents' names, birth dates, addresses, whether or not they're up to date on their immunizations. There's a whole slew of information and data collection that comes with this that makes running a program so much easier. When we had a licensing visit in the fall, our licensor was so impressed that at a click of a button, I could tell her exactly what attendance looked like on a certain week, or show her that I knew in a moment that all of our immunizations were up to date as of that moment for our children enrolled. So it's been a huge impact on our program. And we use the sort of loss of projected income in conjunction with QuickBooks. So I think sometimes when people are like, oh, I already use QuickBooks for all of these things, using a CCMS system and QuickBooks together really has been a game changer for us, because now I have all the data I could possibly need at my fingertips. I'm not leaping through attendance records anymore. So a game changer for sure.
Great, thanks, Christina. So Luann, we're going to skip over the next slide, and I want to go to the one right after that. Yeah, full enrollment. So Christina covered all of these points really, but so it's understanding what openings you have, but it's also being able to project and see like what openings might be coming up and prepare for that in advance. It's managing the wait list. It also helps you to juggle part-time slots, right? If you've got a family that needs 2 days a week, you really want to pair that with a family that needs 3 days a week. And lots more we could say about that, but just know that these tools for automation really help you to get your arms around all of this information and manage it in a way that you can really reduce the number of days where you have empty seats in your classroom, and that also translates then into fuller revenue. Let's go to the next section, which I think is on tracking cost per child. So tracking your cost per child, I'm going to be honest with you, you can't do it just with the CCMS. You also have to have an accounting system. Christina's going to talk about their use of QuickBooks and how they pair QuickBooks with their CCMS. But when you put those two pieces together so that you understand the cost by classroom and the revenue that's coming in by classroom, you can really drill down to understand your cost in a way that helps you really manage things like setting your fees, understanding the impact of enrollment. Again, if you have 1 or 2 seats that are open in a classroom, look what happens to your unit cost. It rises dramatically. So, so again, software will help you with this. Tracking costs is a really big deal, and it's made a whole lot easier when you have tools to help you with that. Next slide. I want to actually keep going, Luann, and let's go and talk about the third leg of the iron triangle, which is collection. Because I think this is actually, so go to the next slide. I think this is probably the biggest, fastest impact when you move to a CCMS. So what I'm showing you here is an aging report. So this shows you by everyone who owes you money, by, in this case, every family for tuition. It shows you what is owed and how many billing cycles behind a family may be, right? And again, it translates that into money so that you really understand, or translates that into totals. Here's the important takeaway around collections. The older the debt gets, the harder it's going to be for you to collect it. And so if you can stay on top of late payments and make sure that they never get more than 60 days old, you have a really good chance of changing the scenario with bad debt. Next slide. Keep going, because I'm not going to use these action planning ones, because we've got Christina who's going to tell us about how she uses it for action planning. So, so Christina, why don't you talk about the impact on your program when you move to electronic payment?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess a unique part about Pine Forest is we collect tuition monthly. So around the end of the month and the first of every month, I was probably running to the bank 4 to 6 times in that time frame, which I'm sure all of you can relate to is sometimes not feasible within banking hours. And so the shift to doing automatic, we send tuition invoices monthly on the 3rd Monday of every month. They automatically go out to all of our enrolled families. They're already pre-set up, and automatic payments just start rolling in from that point on, and they're all due by the 1st of the month. And so in that instance, I have a really good tracking method between our CCMS and QuickBooks to sort of tell like who's maybe teetering on the edge of having late tuition. And so with that, I'm able to make sure, like today is what, the 4th of May, and I know that all 78 families enrolled at Pine Forest have already paid all of their tuition invoices because I have that real-time data between our CCMS and QuickBooks to give me that information. It's been a game changer. We, we had dips in enrollment due to COVID and reopening, but since then, since things have started to smooth out a little bit, our revenue, we're able to see it picking up and being much more consistent. And that's great because all of these tools, especially for collections, has been able to help me plan for our 2021-22 school year budget because I know real-time data around what I've gotten for tuition. In some situations, for late fees, it's helpful to know who those families are. And I tend to use the messaging feature in our CCMS system as a way to talk to parents. I like to think of myself as younger, but I know there's parents here who are younger than me who are much more of the texting era. And so our CCMS communication tool really speaks to how some of our parents are choosing to communicate, less through email, more through like a text message, instant messaging system. So even in that moment, oftentimes I can say, hey, don't forget it's the 2nd of the month and I don't see you paid tuition yet. And almost instantly by the end of the day, parents have jumped on to pay tuition, right? They need those like in the moment dinged reminders to get in and take care of those things. So tracking collections has been huge because we know, right, that iron triangle, that if you are missing that last key box and it starts to wobble, all the other pieces start to fall apart too.
Yeah. So a couple of things that a CCMS will do for you if you use it to collect tuition is when the parent comes in the morning and they, they enter their code or they hold up their smartphone, however they sign their child in. If their tuition is late, a little reminder will pop up, and you can decide. You can control, the message that you wanted to say. You can personalize it, but a reminder will come up and say, your tuition is now due. Your tuition is 3 days overdue, or whatever. That daily reminder helps because, parents might be able to say, oh yeah, one or 2 or 3 days, but eventually, that's going to keep that from getting 60 days old. I can guarantee you. So they get reminders every day. They also have a feature. Many of them have a feature. I don't know how many of you have late pickup fee policies, but if you do, you can set up your CCMS so that if a parent clocks in past the grace period, it automatically adds those late fees to their bill. So you don't have to remember to do it. It's done for you, and it's also sort of indisputable, right? Because it's done by the time clock. And once parents learn that you're doing that, they learn pretty quickly. And then finally, I want to show you another slide. Actually, let's go to the next slide, because sometimes program leaders will say to us, oh, I'm really not comfortable collecting money electronically. I don't know if my parents want to do that, but we have to remember that we are probably not in the same demographic. As young as you are, Christine, you're even a little old
Christina.
as a child care parent, right? So the parents that we're serving today are what we call digital natives. They were born using technology, and only 14% of them pay bills by mail. Half of them don't even have checkbooks. So we have to remember our customers are very comfortable with this technology, even if we are going to have a learning curve with it. But I really want to show you this next slide, because I've said this, and now I want to show you the numbers. So these numbers come from a real project in Arizona with some folks that we work with out in Arizona, and that the names have been changed to protect the innocent, the names of the programs. I like to have fun with that. But these numbers are real. So at the beginning of a project, when they kicked it off at the beginning of the year, what you see in the first column is how much bad debt each program had. What you see in the September column is once they switched to the CCMS and started collecting electronically, that was how much bad debt they had. You can see it made a dramatic difference in their ability to collect tuition on time and in full. Next slide.
Sharon, I heard recently from a Vermont program, it was a 90% improvement. They had so much bad debt that changing to using technology was 90%. It was stunning.
Yeah, Luann, the numbers absolutely blow me away. I have a similar chart from our colleagues in Atlanta, and they had a program that really struggled with this. It was like 30,000 overall. I think they were serving like 30 programs. When they added up all of the bad debt, it was like $500,000. That's real money that's being left on the table. So it always has a dramatic improvement and impact. So, all right, I think we're going to talk a little bit next about, we're going to talk about your time, and we're going to talk about whether you want to spend time, or whether you want to spend time doing these tasks or money to pay somebody to do these tasks or have them done automatically, right? So we pulled together this little chart from interviewing people, but Christine, you actually track your time. So why don't you share what you learned about how you're saving time with your CCMS?
Yeah, so again, I was a total skeptic, right? Like Lorraine and Luann came a couple years ago and they were trying to get programs to sign on for ProCare. And I was like, yes. And then like at the last minute, like couldn't do it. And, you know, COVID happened to be like the shove I needed off the cliff, but I will never turn back, right? Like I have discovered that when I took this job as a director of a program, I was like, I'm going to be in classrooms all the time. I'm going to be mentoring teachers. I'm going to be supervising them. It's going to be beautiful. And it wasn't, because I was spending most of my time doing all the business things, which was not my background, right? Like I didn't go to school to get an MBA. I went to school to be a teacher. And so all of those mundane sort of tasks were sort of dragging me into the weeds. And so I have found, even amongst COVID, that I have been spending way less time, because all of these systems listed under task in some format for me as a director are now automated. There are things that happen with very little time and effort from me that I know are accurate. It's efficient, and it's really losing less of my time. So I cannot say it enough. It's less time. It might look scary. This might all look really overwhelming, but it's less time. So I found that I'm focusing in on the details of the business side less and less and less, but that doesn't mean that it's not working. I use CCMS to give me the information I need every day to gather data quickly in order to complete all the paperwork, right? Like we know there's so many different, spreadsheets that need Act 166 attendance or Power School. So on Friday, because I was like, they're going to want to know, like I need to actually know that it doesn't just feel like that. So last Friday, I had to do Act 166 attendance. We partner with 6 school districts. I had to do our subsidy attendance, the CCFAP. So that was about 40 children. And so usually I would be leafing through paper attendance records. So that would be about 210 entries I'd have to do. It used to take me over 2 hours to go through all of those pieces of paper, be like, oh no, nobody signed out this child on this date, like going to track people down. Last Friday, I used strictly our CCMS system, and it took me 40 minutes to do all of the same data points. It was amazing. And I had never really quantified it. So to then feel like validated, like, okay, I shaved an hour and 20 minutes off of my time. What can I go do now? Was a great feeling. The CCMS system Pine Forest use also does payroll. It can also do tuition billing and tracking. Like all of those things for us are automated through QuickBooks, but most systems will do all of these things for you. And it can literally save you hours of time every month that you could then be focusing on other things like building relationships with children in classrooms, supervising and mentoring your teachers. So much, like not even the fact that we've like reduced our footprint on paper, but it's totally worth the investment in time. I cannot speak to it enough.
But how do you really feel, Christina? All right, let's go to the next slide, because I actually know Christina is very enthusiastic about the staff-child ratio management. So go ahead, keep sharing.
Yeah, so this gives me like real-time data. So the financial investment was that we paid for a CCMS program up front for the whole year, which was not a planned budget moment for us, but it was well worth the investment. And then the only other major investment for us was that we had to buy tablets for the classrooms, but Costco is where it's at. So we bought tablets for every classroom. The administrative team, we each have our own tablets, so we can view what's happening in every single classroom every single day. So I could look on a tablet right now and know how many babies are there, how many teachers are in the classroom, with real-time data all the time. Teachers check into their classrooms, so even floating teachers who you might hire to cover breaks, or they might be there to cover meetings or to cover someone's vacation, they sign in and out as they move between classrooms. So you always know what's happening. Our CCMS system also alerts us that, a child may have just arrived with their parent and they're walking up to the classroom, and that when they get there, they're going to be out of ratio. So we can immediately ask somebody to go support that classroom. It allows me as a director, this is one of my favorite pieces, to make day-to-day and even hour-to-hour decisions on how I'm going to best use our teachers' hours, right? We all are paying our teachers, hopefully 40 hours a week, to be an early childhood educator. And so this really gives us the opportunity to figure out, oh, wait a second, there's 2 babies and 3 teachers in that classroom. What could 2 teachers maybe step out to do? Could they have a meeting? Does one of them need a supervision session? We've been talking about redesigning the infant play space outside. Maybe we could pull them down and we can sort of make a game plan. It really gives us the time to think outside the box, because before I would have to get up, leave the office, obviously what they need to do. But then I would sort of wander around and find people just sort of hanging out, making coffee. Now I have time to be like, make a cup of coffee and then let's come have a conversation. I'm noticing that we need to check off some things on your to-do. Those kind of pieces have become so much easier. And I would say that our teachers, despite the fact that they might be picking up extra tasks, at times they're also just feeling much more seen, heard, and respected because we're giving more focus to them and building them up as early childhood educators. So this feature has really helped us to make sure we're using our revenue and resources efficiently to ensure that our program is thriving. So yes, I am enthusiastic, but
yeah,
can't speak enough about it.
So that's a good segue, because we're going to talk a little bit now about pedagogical leadership and how CCMS helps you really embrace that role more as a director, as being a pedagogical leader. So so let's advance, and next slide. So let's talk about teachers first. So what do teachers need? We all know that teachers need better compensation in order to really make a career out of this work. Health benefits, huge, and paid sick leave and vacation time. So that's sort of on one side of the ledger. But the thing that we, I think, often overlook is that it's about wages and compensation. It's also about working conditions. And are we expecting our teachers to be with children for the full time that they are on, like they get a 15-minute break or maybe they get a lunch break, but the rest of the time they're with kids? When do we think that they're going to actually have time to do planning and to do reflection? So having some time off the floor is really important if we expect them to be the professionals that we expect them to be. They also need ongoing job-embedded professional development, right? So it's not about, you have to get so many hours to go attend that workshop. It's really about, in my job, in the work that I'm doing in this classroom with these kids, what skills do I need? What knowledge, what additional resources do I need? And having access to coaches, to a director who is a pedagogical leader, being able to be part of a community practice, those are all things that really change the way a professional is able to see themselves and act and really grow as a professional. So the bottom line is that teachers need both time and money, right? So let's see how CCMS can help to support that. So I showed you this a little earlier. This is that reflective practice cycle. Next slide. And I showed you this chart a little bit earlier. I showed you the after, but these are real numbers. So as you can see, as I said to you a little bit earlier, in this program, really less than half of the personnel budget was being spent on teachers. So they were able to see a dramatic shift, but they were actually on the road to move that needle even more. So here's what this example of this program did, which happens to be in Richmond, Virginia. Next slide, Luann. So because they were able to shift more money into the teacher salaries, what did they do with that? They actually made investments in their 401ks. They believe they established a 401k, and they set aside a percentage of salary that the employer would contribute, a matching program. They made, everyone got a raise, and some people got some bonuses. They also, and you can see actually that this was the result. Over on the side, it talks about, their collections. They went from having 13% bad debt to 0 bad debt. That alone brought in a ton of money, but then they were also able to save money on, they were paying an outside bookkeeper. They no longer needed that because they had all of the financial information. And there was, again, this was just the first year. This was extra money that was freed up. The director reported that she had 17 hours a week more in her schedule. And this is very much like you, Christina, trained and steeped in pedagogical leadership. I mean, that was her heart and soul. So she was able to then get back into the classroom, made an enormous difference. I believe they also hired a floater so they could start giving teachers some paid planning time. So it completely changed the way teachers were able to operate in this program. Next slide. So let's talk about child assessment for a minute here. All good programs are doing assessment. They're doing observations of kids, and they're tracking kids' progress. The takeaway from this is when you can document those observations electronically, and you can take pictures and videos and pull all of that together, it really makes a difference in how you're able to use that data. Let's go to the next slide. I think we have we have a slide that Christina's going to describe how they're using technology for child assessment.
Right. You think after all this that I'm going to realize I need to unmute myself. So our child care management software has allowed us to connect with families about learning in a whole new way. Pine Forest used to do the traditional take photos of the digital camera, print them, cut them, glue them, handwrite these beautiful observations, which is still part of what we do, but for the most part, we sort of shifted to having much more of a digital portfolio for children because their parents aren't able to come into the classroom. And it was really important for us as early childhood educators that we were drawing them in, that they were able to see the physical space where their children were learning and playing every day. But we've also noticed that it's again, even for teachers, it's taking less time. One of our toddler teachers and I were talking about this yesterday, and she was saying that she can do a portfolio entry every day for every child in their classroom in under an hour that are linked to learning objectives that show what a child is saying, doing, things that they're learning, skills they're working on, skills they've just recently mastered. I was like, that's huge. We used to have a goal of 1 to 2 per week, and now our 12 toddlers are getting 1 observation a day. So 5 overall every week is really impressive. And so for our CCMS system, we're able to put in observations, which you can see on the right-hand side. It's talking about Evelyn and her interest in the light projector that was in their classroom a couple weeks ago. There's a picture of Evelyn in that moment that the observation was written about, right? She has her hair in 3 little ponies. She was really intrigued by the fact that her ponytails were making a crown-like shadow. And then on the very bottom left, you can see how we were able to assign that observation. And ours only allows you to assign 1 at a time, but you can go back and tie multiple to this observation. So it's also reminding parents. We've found that this is also a huge advocacy moment. Parents are now, we used to be like, oh, their binders are over there. Feel free to take them home for the weekend. And we would either, people would just yeah, or they would take it home and we wouldn't see it again for a whole nother month. Now parents in the moment are getting real live time observations and assessments in that moment of their child's learning. They can sort of begin to use some of these things at home. They might notice that a child's working on a certain skill. They could work on it at home as well. So there's consistency between the home and school environments. We've also been able to use it as an advocacy tool, right? We tout ourselves as a play-based emergent curriculum program, but now we're showing parents what that really means every day at our school. They're starting to see what that looks like, that this might feel like a play situation sometimes, but look at all the skills they learned. When you break down the hand washing process for families, oftentimes you can, there's probably 4 to 6 skills that go along with just hand washing. And so when you break down even a mundane task for grown adults who are not steeped in early education, they can see oh my gosh, there is so much that goes into just hand washing. So this has been a great tool for us to advocate for our school, why we use the curriculum we use, and also just to advocate on children's behalf of everything that they're learning in these beautiful moments in our classrooms. We still use ASQ and TSG for assessments, which also tie into our CCMS program. And we're also able to take all of these observations of Evelyn, for example. Her name was changed, she's actually innocent. But we can take Evelyn's digital records of all of these observations and also print them. So if they wanted to mail it to their grandmother who lives in Phoenix, we could easily print it and mail it to grandma. I also love that our families can share these moments on their own time with people that they love. So we also know there's been grandparents who have been able to see their grandchildren in over a year. So all of these observations, moments, and photos can also be shared by families all the people in Evelyn's life who might be interested in what she's doing. So.
And maybe interested in making a contribution to your program.
I was just gonna say we did a little something we call Valentine's Day Friends and Lessons Day at Pine Forest, and we actually ended up getting 25 new social media followers and got donations from grandparents just from this sort of moment. So there's lots of ways that you can use these sort of moments and experiences to really, garner donations, build out who your base of fans are on social media, people who are going to start to connect with your program. So it goes well beyond just observation.
Yeah, that's great. That's great, Christina. So let's go to the next slide because I wanted to show you a screenshot. This happens to be an online assessment tool that I learned about recently. Looks like we have a little graphic mishap over there, but that's okay. That's another one on the screen. But anyway, so, I think as early childhood people, for a long time, we've really tried to hold the line on no use of technology in the classroom, right? That kids shouldn't be using digital media too early. That's all absolutely true. But adults making good use of technology is really, it's just really good practice. And so this happens to be another assessment tool called Cambu, which is aligned with the high scope standards, but it also has early learning standards in it. It also has accreditation standards. So you could use a product like this to not only track individual child development and do all of the things that Christina was just talking about in building portfolios, and some of these are even connected to online reporting forms, so that if you, for example, in Pennsylvania, if you take the pre-K money, you have to record child assessment data 3 times a year, at the beginning, the middle, and at the end.
We've lost you a bit, Sharon.
Gwen, we can't hear you anymore. We can't hear you anymore.
We can't.
You looked very passionate about what you were saying.
Well, and Christina,
Okay.
well,
Am I back?
she's back. Yeah.
Am I back? So here's a little technology bite. My husband just went to pick up our grandson from school, and when he turned the car on, my audio switched from my headphones to the car.
I've had that happen too. Yep.
So anyway, these tools help us work smarter, not harder. That's what I was trying to say. All right, let's go to the next slide. We're actually we're doing pretty well. We're almost through our slide deck here. So family engagement, you've been talking about that. But remember, so there is families learning about and seeing what their children are doing, but it's also families taking responsibility for keeping records updated, for not having to fill out paper forms of everything, but being able to get things electronically and get back to electronically. So it's just the way that we need to be working. Next slide. Same thing. Keep going. Let's keep going. Staff management. So finally, I guess we just want to sort of finish all of this up with talking a little bit more about the director's role and how a CCMS can really help you manage the things that you need to know and do for your staff. So we've talked a little bit about scheduling and staff-child ratios, helping with HR support, things like tracking. So when if your teachers use your CCMS for signing in, your records, what's the word I'm trying to say? Time clock is automatically populated, and those records can actually be sent electronically to your payroll service, which really cuts down the amount of time you need on that, but it also can help you track things like sick leave and furloughed employees and things like that. Professional development plans. All of the major CCMSs have a module for you to enter information about each staff person. So you can keep track of things like what are their educational levels, their credentials, what are their PD needs, and their, tracking their professional development hours over the course of the year, making sure that they're keeping up with health checks and clearances, and it will send you alerts when those things are due. So really staying on top of all of those pieces. And then finally, we've talked a lot about this, directors need time to be in the classroom working with teachers. So CCMS will give you some staff management tools. Next slide. Will give you tools to be able to manage all of those pieces. We have maybe just a few minutes left. And so I want to go to the next set of slides because I want to talk just for a minute. We touched on the idea that if provider data is connected electronically to public databases, to state systems, your job becomes a lot easier, right? Because if you're reporting food program information or trying to report attendance for subsidy or whatever it is, if you don't have to do that manually, it saves you time. But there are other benefits as well. Next slide. So think about all of these things that providers have to keep track of. And think about all the ways that the state really needs to have that information. And a lot of the way, two things happen right now, right? Either it never sort of makes its way into the public database, that information either doesn't get transferred, or if it gets transferred, it's usually someone having to log into a portal and someone having to enter information, which takes up a lot of time. If that information could be flowing regularly and automatically, it helps providers because providers don't have to enter the information, one child at a time, so it saves time. But also think about the benefits for our public systems if they have a view into what's really going on in the real world, right? So actually, Luann, if you want to say a little bit about the real-time supply and demand work that you guys are doing, but that's one example. If programs are keeping track of openings that they have in the classroom, and there's an easy way to get that information into the search tool that parents are using, it helps providers fill their seats, and it helps parents find what's available. Do you want to say a couple words about your work in that area?
Well, that's exactly right, Sharon. Yes, that's exactly right. And we're so excited there's a couple areas where we're excited about this work. One is Vermont Child Care Links, which is a statewide data system that's really user-friendly for parents to just click on and find childcare. And what that does on the other end, from the perspective of the directors, is that you are in live time updating your openings, things that Christina has already talked about, that then allows you to fill a slot immediately. And it allows parents to actually be able to find slots when and where they're available. And so we're rolling that out soon. We have been enrolling programs statewide, and we are about next month actually to start promoting that to parents. It's so user-friendly. You can show your beautiful website. If you have one, you have an opportunity to put information about your program, and it links to BFIS, which also then allows the parent, if they would like to go to BFIS and do the whole background check information on the program, should they want to do that as well. It's also available for folks in the state, like resource and referral people, to help parents. It's there, available, and parents can access it. We also have a region that's actually using it as a shared waitlist tool. So programs within a region can work together to, I don't have an opening, but I know Christina does, kind of work. So that's happening. And at the same time, we know that our state is embarking on some updates, major updates to our Bright Futures information system. So what a time to be working on this. And the last thing I would say really quickly is all the policy work that's happening, the more information that we know about what's needed, what's available, where it's available, the ages and all of that is really helping drive our policy work statewide, where we're making such progress as a state. So excited.
So I know. So go to the next slide we're going to use is the last slide, because I think this is the vision, right? So think about what we could know. That the question on the previous slide said, what if 80% of providers were using CCMS and sending their data sort of seamlessly into the various systems? What could we know? So in the R&R world, we could know what openings there are like in real time, and we could know, who has openings and what type of setting, and, really match children and family needs with the services that are out there. What can we know about the workforce? We could have a really full picture of current staff credentials. We could understand a lot more about compensation, about turnover rates, and we could understand better what impacts turnover, program information. I love this one because, what if we could start to put this data together and we could see, so what's happening in our higher quality rated programs? Is staff turnover less? Does it make a difference for teachers? What's the interplay of all of those things? And then, over on the other bubbles, financial data. Instead of asking people to fill out a market rate survey, we could really know in real time, what are people charging for their programs? And really begin to understand things like collection rates around copayment. Of course, Vermont's going to have the best system in the country pretty soon. So, we might not be as far behind the 8 ball. We're going to be a leader among states. But having really good financial data, having that child assessment data, understanding more about child health. So this is really where we want to go. I'll just say one other thing. If some of you are thinking, oh, I don't know if it's a good idea for data to be shared. It is absolutely best practice to share data within agreements. I don't know if in the previous slide we had that data trust agency. So when this data is shared, it's always done in the form of a contractual agreement that protects the privacy of individuals, the privacy of families and children and teachers, right? There are rules about how it can be shared and when it can be shared and those pieces. So don't worry, because people are really thinking hard about that and paying attention to that issue. It's a concern, and it's also true that there are systems in place to help with that. But there are lots and lots and lots of reasons why you should be moving to an automated environment. And I know Let's Grow Kids has a real commitment to help with that. And Christina, thank you so much for sharing your experience. So,
can I give one piece of advice? Because I was hesitant. So yeah. When talking about this like late summer, and we implemented it at the end of September, but we sat down with our teaching community and said, if we were to do this, what would you want it to do? And so we had a list from teachers, we had a list from the administrative leadership team, what we wanted. So it sounds like work, but I promise you it's going to benefit. We made a spreadsheet of all the things we wanted, and then we picked with research 6 CCMSs we wanted to try. So we signed up for webinars with each one. We asked everybody the same questions, and like resoundingly, the one we picked has been the best one for us. But I would invest the time, because every program in Vermont is different, right? We all have different settings, different sizes, different number of children. So it's really about determining what you need from the system to make sure that the cost you're going to invest in it is going to be worth your while, because nothing would be worse than spending $2,000 for a year subscription to find out it doesn't do X, Y, and Z, which was the whole reason you signed up. So I highly recommend signing up. All of them have little short webinars, usually it's like 30 to 60 minutes, where they overview the whole program, talk to you about it, and really invest the time to pick what's going to work. It's the same thing I tell families when they come here, right? Like, this is an early childhood program. It should feel like home. Like, this program should feel like it's going to be worth your time and money. So that would be my best advice, is to like do some research before you jump on and sign the dotted line.
And
Yep,
we have a number of programs statewide that are using various vendors at this point. So if anyone has a question, reaching out to any of the three of us, we probably know someone who's using the vendor that you are considering, and we're happy to connect you. So we're excited about this. Sharon, thank you so much. Christina, amazing. Sharon, anything else that you want to add?
No, I would echo what you both have said. Feel free to reach out. If I can share any more resources, we have a lot of resources around selecting a CCMS. I'd be happy to share any of those with people who want to know more. So you can reach me through the OpEx website. And actually, why don't you pop up that last slide, which I think has our contact information on it. Yeah, well, it has our website. So Opportunities Exchange.
Well, my computer's won't let me turn the page.
Well, that's all right. It's opportunitiesexchange.org. It's pretty simple. Actually, you know what? That's our old one. It's now OpEx. If you do a Google search for Opportunities Exchange, you'll find us. So, yeah, so thanks for spending time with us.
And we certainly, I know we're a little bit over time. Pam just had a question about, Christina just put it in the chat. Thank you. There's ProCare, there's Smart Care, there's Wonder School is an amazing tool for family childcare and small license programs. Christina put the another whole list: Tadpole, Brightwheel, Kids Day, Life Cubby. Almost think every day there's a new one. There are some that have more of a track record than others. And I will just close by saying Sharon Easterling is the national expert on the, and we are so lucky to have her here in Vermont. Yes, Capterra, that's right. We're so lucky to have her here working with Opportunities Exchange, the leaders on all this work, and having her live here in Vermont and work with us. So,
well, I'm the lucky one. So anyway, that word I just put there, Capterra. If you go to if you Google that and you go to their website and you search for childcare software, it will take you to a web page with 150 different options. More than you wanted to know.
And more than you need. Thank you so much.
All right.
This is amazing. Have a good afternoon, everybody.
You too.
Bye-bye.